Is Mahabharata true?
Anytime you ask the question, is something true? How do we figure that out, right? So there are three aspects to it. First thing, we look at a description. Now, somebody wrote it. The person who wrote it, Maharishi Vyasa, he's saying he's a contemporary to Mahabharata. So, iti ha asa, like this is how it happened, it's a, in a way, first person account. We also look at what people are saying in general. What is the mainstream belief, mainstream understanding that it happened? The remaining piece is when did it happen? So it's important for people to understand it's a true event that happened. And once we talk of a true event, immediately, if it's a true event, then there is a timing attached to it.
Time, the basic measurement of everything. Take away all the clocks and the world will collapse. But we have been around longer than these clocks. So how did we record time then? Hands go around dials continuously. Upon certain completions, we add our minutes, hours, days, months, years, decades. It's all about the hand going around the dials continuously. The moon goes around Earth too in 27 days. Imagine it's a hand. The sun appears doing the same every 365 days. The planets take longer. They are all hands. Now all that's needed are the dials, fixed markings that never move. How about stars? Mark them in some way and we have our dials. Indians call them nakshatras. A giant celestial clock ticking for billions of years. Note it down periodically and you have historical timestamps.
The logic is very simple. If I tell you the time, in the wristwatch, the old kinds, you will able to easily imagine where the hands of the clock are. Now think the other way. If I tell you where the hands on the clock are, you will able to tell exactly where the time is. Now think slowly. Imagine there is ancient book that has described the hands of the celestial clock. Can we not reverse engineer it to figure out what the time is?
It's an ancient Indian tradition to name prominent stars after great rishis. Agastya's Canopus, the 7 stars of the Big Dipper, are identified with the names of Saptarishis. The pole star, to which the Earth's axis points to, is called Dhruv Tara. And so were Arundhati and Vashishta, stars. If you look in the sky tonight, you will spot 2 stars, Alcor and Mizar, just beside the pole star. They are huddled very close, but Vashishta is in front of Arundhati. Standard astronomy tells us it has been forever like that.
When I started reading the Bhishma Parva, the first chapter, second and third chapter, what Vyasa is describing to Dhritarashtra there is like a series of nimittas. Nimitta is a Sanskrit word. It can be referred to as a signs, as an omen, and the omen can be good and bad. Okay? But there is a series of these different omens described, and almost felt like this one, this Arundhati Vasishta, as if it is placed deliberately there. Because there are many other non-astronomy omens also. But here is something, Arundhati Vasishta, as if, and some additional observations, astronomy, as if kept deliberately. And I'm thinking, how do I figure this out? Or why Vyasa has done it? Or whoever has done it, why it is done? If anyone uses the basic knowledge of astronomy, they are going to say these stars are so stable, their proper motions are so stable, how is this ever Arundhati going to walk ahead of Vasishtha? That is not possible in our times. Like tonight, if you go and look at it, Vasishtha is going to be ahead.
Absolutely.
And if you go back 1,000 years, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000, it's the same phenomenon.
Absolutely.
And most of the Mahabharata researchers are saying Mahabharata war happened in the last 6,000 years. Out of all the Mahabharata researchers, I would say 95% plus of those Mahabharata researchers did not show any awareness of this. In fact, many people were so puzzled that they did not want to talk about this observation at all. I decided to deep dive. This is going back about 1994. And my house was filled with every kind of book you can imagine on astronomy. Astronomy star catalogs, celestial star latitudes and longitude tables. What I was trying to look for is an instance and possible cause why astronomy speak Arundhati would go ahead of Vasishtha. But every time I tried, the star catalog said no. That's not possible. And over time, kind of you lose heart. I tried in different ways, then things change, different priorities come up. So it fizzled out.
So finally, how did you see it? How did you understand it? How did you decode it?
Well, I heard about visual astronomy software and I jumped with joy. Now, keep in mind, these are the days of early 90s. Then I played with many other softwares, still no luck. Finally, I decided, I tried many times, I'm going to almost wind it up, pack it up, and close the project. Just as a last attempt, I tried with the latest software. And guess what? I had put it in such a fashion that made it simple for myself. So if I get the negative number, that means Arundhati walked ahead of Vasishtha. And so 15 years later, to 1994, 1995 to 2009, on one fine day, 8 May 2009, Friday, after my work, I sat down there and late night, 2 o'clock, Eureka, Arundhati did walk ahead of Vasishtha. And I went back, I reverted all the way into antiquity through the cycles of precession. Did it happen ever again? And so from the antiquity you come to our times, there is only one interval between 11,000 BCE and 4500 BCE. That is when Arundhati walks ahead of Vasishtha. That is when Mahabharata war happened. And that changed my life.
And what was the reason for this?
The very basic fundamental principle in astronomy, the precession of the Earth's axis. See, it has few consequences. One consequence is that the point of equinox, nakshatra, that changed, right? Because of that, the other one is the lunar month in the Indian system also changes with the season, right? The third one is the pole stars, they change. And the fourth one is why Arundhati is walking ahead of Vasishtha, which is the relative positions of the stars as they go around the pole star, that also changes because the pole point changes because of the precession of Earth's axis.
What Nilesh had found could change everything. An omen, a mere poetic embellishment, turning into a major astronomy event, was problematic. What's poem and what's astronomy?
Well, that's exactly what got me sucked into this further. As an engineer, I could see a major flaw into all other Mahabharata researchers, right exactly on this point. In engineering, we will call this a standardization problem. So what is happening, something that is poetic is been interpreted by me as astronomy. Now that was the complaint, that is even a recurring complaint. On the other hand, what you will find is they were saying this because they could not prove or interpret the Arundhati Vasishta observation. On the other hand, in other places from Mahabharata, wherever they could test it, they were taking the poetics as astronomy. So essentially it's a standardization problem, and I said we need to fix that first before we go further. So the statement of my theory is very simple. All astronomy descriptions of the Mahabharata text are actual observations of the sky of Mahabharata times. So what the theory does is it necessary to test every astronomy description in an objective fashion. No room for confusion, no room for interpretation.
Mahabharata is made up of more than 1 lakh verses. More than 300 of those have random references to stars, nakshats, planets, and the likes. Rarely as direct information, often as metaphors. Nilesh Oak's theory was extremely far-fetched. Vague metaphors are celestial data. Even to entertain the idea was funny. But once a theory has been claimed, the only serious way to falsify it is to test it. But what if it passed the test? It would mean that Mahabharata had recorded the hands of the celestial sphere, that the time of the war could be actually calculated.
Let me explain how I arrived at 5561 BCE. So Arundhati Vasishta gives that time interval, 5,000, 6,000 years. How do you check for every single year? And that's when the planetary evidence from Mahabharata text comes to anyone's rescue. It came to my rescue. So visible planets are what? Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Venus and Mercury. And Mahabharata text is super rich, more than 50 plus astronomy descriptions of these planets. I started with Saturn and Jupiter. And do you know why? Because they are the slowest moving planets. Guess what? How frequently they will come? Saturn goes around in 30 years. Jupiter goes around in 12 years. So 30 times 2 is 60, 12 times 5 is 60. So every 60 years, whatever their positions are, they will repeat. So now you take that 6,000 year interval divided by 60, you've reduced from 6,000 years down to 100 years, 100 instances. And then you look at the astronomy evidence for Mars. There are 8 to 10 different descriptions. And as soon as you add the Mars descriptions, bingo, you come to 5561 BCE, and actually only 5561 BCE and no other year.
In the years to come, Nilesh would laboriously try to simulate each observation and make notes. Strange things waited for him. Saturn was near Uttar Phaguni and came near Chitra by the first day of the war. Saturn and Jupiter went retrograde near Vishakha, and Jupiter crossed the ecliptic near Shravan. Saturn and Jupiter both were giving Pida, afflicting, to Rohini, and Sun Moon were giving Pida to Rohini. Mars crossed the ecliptic near Magha and also Jyeshta Anuradha. Mars went retrograde near Chitra Swati and came to Shravan Abhijit on the first day of war. Venus went retrograde near Purva Bhadrapad. Moon phases and positions through the first half of Margashish.
References after references, same story. I mean, it's all there. No matter which reference you pull, it just fits right into it. Imagine a Sanskrit text that is preserving the memories, astronomy memories going back to 7,000 years. If that doesn't explode your mind, nothing will. Dr. P.V. Vartak is my great inspiration. And Dr. Vartak showed me the exhaustive approach that one must use, which I found frankly lacking in any other Mahabharata researcher. They were very selective, almost like they didn't want to use the Mahabharata text or Mahabharata evidence to date the Mahabharata. Now, how funny is that? Dr. Vartak is the first one who at least attempted to solve the puzzle. He realized it's a puzzle. He realized the importance of Arundhati Vasishtha observation for the dating of Mahabharata and tried to solve it in 3 different ways, failed, and noted down his failures. He was asking since 1971 every single Mahabharata researcher, and he said, "You are the first one to do it successfully."
As Nilesh recorded his observation, they all circled around 5561 BC. It was magic. As if the author of Mahabharata had intentionally put them as breadcrumbs. He had entrusted the future Indians with figuring it out. Mahabharata seemed to really talk only about 5561 BC. The process can be visualized as a rotating assembly of 3 gears. Every reference is a gear. The big ones are the star observations. The mid-sized are the outer planets. And the small ones are the faster phenomena like moon going around the earth. Move the big one a little, the small ones go crazy. Move the small one, the big one barely changes. So you need a breakthrough that can correctly position the big gears first. Arundhati Vasishtha position was one such. Then came the comets, planets, etc. They helped pin down the year. And then came the small ones. Bhagavan Krishna went to Karna to convince him to join the Pandav side. When Karna refuses, Krishna returns to the Pandav camp. His brother Balram refuses to be a part of this madness and goes for pilgrimage. He returns after the war.
There are some observations, astronomy observations in the Mahabharata text that do not directly immediately agree for 5561 BC. So there are about less than 10. Okay? One of them, for example, is Balaram Tirtha Yatra, and that has to go with the pre-war timeline. So the first day of the war, and before that there are a lot of instances, right from Krishna going to Hastinapur on a peace mission. And what happens is, one of the interpretation, not my interpretation, many Mahabharata researchers have done that they say from the Krishna-Karna meeting after the failed peace mission, Mahabharata war began in 7 days. Now the reason you shouldn't take 7 days, you cannot take 7 days, is because there are many pre-war instances. And if you take only 7 days, they cannot be explained. There are a lot of events, lot of things that have happened from the Krishna-Karna meeting to the first day of the war. One of them is Balaram Tirtha Yatra. Now what the statement says is Balaram left on a Tirtha Yatra and went on for 42 days before returning on the 18th day of the war. So if the war begins 7 days after Krishna-Karna meeting, that's 7 days plus 18, that's a lot less than 42 days.
We know Mahabharata through books published in the modern day. The 2 most definitive versions are Gita Press and Bhandarakar Critical Edition. Manuscripts, as and when they were discovered or brought to light from all parts of Asia, were used to compile these most popular versions of the epic. On the frontier of this work is Bhandarakar Oriental Research Institute of Pune. Gauri Mohalkar, the former Dean of Sanskrit at Mumbai University and a renowned international scholar of Sanskrit, illuminated us further on this.
This is the Mahabharata Critical Edition published by Bori, Bhandarakar Oriental Research Institute. In the 33rd chapter, verse number 5 of the Shalya Parva, that Chatvarimshadahanyadya dvechame nisritasya vai pushyena samprayatosmi shravane punaragataha. Balarama says 42 days have been spent while I am out. And Pushyena Samprayatosmi, here it reads, I went on Pushya Nakshatra and Shravane Punaragataha, and I came back on Shravana Nakshatra. So whatever theory Nilesh Oak is propounding, this reference is not tallying with his theory.
Something called Pathabhed, which means some word might be written in a slightly different way. Instead of Soma, it might become Yama. And so these kind of errors are introduced, and therefore we have to test each of these to see, does that particular reference make sense in the big scheme of things.
And I saw these Pathabhedas, and interestingly, they make exactly the opposite meaning out of it. Instead of Samprayataha, the variant reading in one of the manuscripts is Sampraptaha. Samprayata is left, and Samprapta is came back exactly opposite meaning.
Okay.
And this change helps him.
Then somebody will say, what about Shravana Nakshatra?
The popular reading, which is accepted by all, Shravane Punaragataha means he came back on Shravana Nakshatra. But instead of that, we have a reading Shravanena Samagataha. Shravanena Samagataha, I came back after Shravana, after listening, after hearing.
Actually, we have a reference in the Mahabharata where Balram states that he listened to the happenings of the war from Narada Muni, and once he listened to it, he heard Shravana. Then he came here on the last day of the war to watch the battle between Duryodhan and Bhima.
So the interpreter has to take the right meaning.
Okay.
And does Vyasa refer to Shravana besides Nakshatra to hearing? Yes, there are some instances.
Okay.
So it's not that you are taking something, which Vyasa never meant.
So when you change Samprayatosmi to Sampraptosmi and you understand Pushya Nakshatra as the last day of the war, this particular reference fits 5561 BCE just like a glove.
The elegant and bold claim made by Nilesh, aided by digital visual astronomy of past events, was shattering all assumptions about the timing of Mahabharata. What he was not aware of was that he was wounding a lot of careers made on Mahabharata research, and he had to pay back.
As far as the right date is concerned, there can be only one correct date. I say this all the time, either all the dates are wrong, all the claims are wrong, or only one of them is correct. So as 5561 becomes more and more popular, because the evidence is proving that and more people start accepting it, the other dates are going to go away. In fact, because of that, I get a lot of flack. Many people are upset, I get a lot of flack.
Whenever new tech comes, a lot of old ideas get obsolete. That's progress. Digital cameras came, film guys got upset. Keyboards came, typists got upset. It's natural. Artificial intelligence will soon replace a lot of norms. Bhishma was one of the most formidable and respected warriors on the Kaurav side. On the 10th day, he was pierced by scores of arrows by Arjun and fell. Being the superhuman he was, he decided to wait for Uttarayan, sun's northward movement, and then leave his body. Later, as Bhishma lies on the bed of arrows, he tells Krishna that it has been 58 days since he fell. The 58 days was a problem, at least for Nilesh. Nilesh's theory was again in a suit. As per the popular narrative, Bhishma lied there for 58 days. But why would he?
Everyone, it's a popular belief that Bhishma was on the bed of arrows for 58 days, and I accepted it. Why would somebody lie? Right? So when I started looking at 5561 BCE, which has been supported by everything else, but not the 58 days, I said, what's wrong here? I started reading Mahabharata again for the nth time. This time, specifically looking for the Bhishma Nirvana evidence. And you know what I found? Actually, it's a very simple math. Like Bhishma fell on the battle on the 10th day of the war, war lasted for 18 days, so those 9 days. Then the Pandavas, they went to the bank of Ganga and lived there for 1 month. They come back, few more things happen. Now they go and see Bhishma on Kurukshetra, and on that day, so already 30 plus 10 days have gone by, so 40 days have gone by. Remember what Krishna said to Bhishma when he met. He says, you have additional 56 days to live. Now just count from there. So that day plus 56 days, and that is the day of winter solstice, 57, and Bhishma passed away day after winter solstice. So those are those 58 days. So when Yudhishthir, Pandavas, Krishna, everyone goes to Bhishma, that is when Bhishma is saying, Ashtapancha Shatam Ratram Shayanasyaadya me gata. My past 58 days felt like hundreds of years. He is referring to that statement in the context of Krishna's statement of he having to stay for additional 56 days. There is a very beautiful, simple explanation. Again, it fits like a glove. Here he wins.
Not only 5561 BCE was getting verified, but just like other scientific theories, the simple theory was pointing out common errors in understanding. And 5561 BCE was making new expeditions and verifying them. Maharishi Vedvyas says, Tathastu. With Bhishma Nirman explained, the research project had matured. 5561 BCE stood as the most likely date of Mahabharata, way ahead of everyone else.
I decided to take all of this work, put it into one place, the book, the plastic salesperson writing a book on the Mahabharata dating. And let me tell you, once I published, this is 2011, it has gone out now to 100,000 plus households and colleges, universities, IITs, IIMs, and different places. But I will tell you also the things got vicious because the Arundhati Vasishta, the entire timeline, all the multidisciplinary evidence, it has really made many people upset. It is one thing to actually figure out the date of the Mahabharata war, but it is a lot more difficult to convince people that you have found one. People also worry, can I trust the software? Well, think it this way, there are 300 opportunities to test if you can trust the software. Because if it doesn't fit for 300 references from Mahabharata, there is no conspiracy going on between Bhagwan Vyasadeva and a software, then it will just fall out. But actually it doesn't. It fits beautifully. All our generations, all existing generations of Indians, I'm convinced they are deracinated. With the colonial education, the minds are colonized. Just imagine if it was some foreign professor. Immediately people will line up and will be excited and accept it. But when somebody shows with the evidence, people may not necessarily take the pain to actually read the book, study the book, understand what has happened. That's a challenge and we have to overcome that. In fact, I'll tell you, when my research came out, it made the leftist upset and it made the extreme religious people upset too, because I was changing the date from the traditional belief of the Kali Yuga and all that 3102 BCE. You can awaken someone if the person is truly asleep. But what do you do if someone is pretending to be asleep? There is no way you are going to change their mind. But what you have to do is basically keep on doing what you are convinced about. And actually, I would tell you, the response is amazing. Response is amazing from all quarters, inside India, outside India, and the journey has to continue. After I published my book, one day I received an email. This was a very exciting paper in genetics. What it showed is there is a sudden change in the female to male ratio from that 3:1, to suddenly 16:1 as an absolute scale, or on the relative scale 5:1, as if like 80% of the male disappeared. suddenly, overnight, a very short period of time. Would you like to guess the timing of that event?
Is it 5561?
You got it. Mahabharata war tells you geographically people came from as far west as Iraq or Syria and as far east as Indonesia, Malaysia, Cambodia and Vietnam, which is a Champa kingdom. So now look at this area. Let's say there are 10 million people. Out of 10 million people, just simple statistics, what, 5 million men, 5 million women? Now back to that 4 million. Out of that 5 million men, 4 million are gone in 18 days. You are left with a 1 million. What is that ratio? 5:1. That's exactly what Monica Carmin paper says. And where is it happening? The epicenter is India. And then it sort of goes out from there. And when is it happening? The middle of 6th millennium BC. That's how impressive evidence is. Now, interestingly, on this paper, there are other researchers who have written paper on a research paper. For example, there is a group at Stanford University who analyzed this data trying to find out the causes, and they propose 3 models and then they discard 2 models. And the one remaining, they say, is the very probable likely model, is essentially, they say, now watch the language, okay? They know nothing about Mahabharata, okay? But they're saying it essentially appears to be a patrilineal war, patrilineal clash between cousin factions of a family. Now what is Mahabharata?
But a common blame against Nilesh was, what about archaeology evidence? There must be something to support this. Physical, tangible, right?
If a theory is successful, which is to say closer to the truth, best approximation to the truth, the expectation is that any new evidence that you look for, and if you can connect the dots, it should fit. And the best example for the Mahabharata date is the archaeology evidence for Dwarka. Right in Dwarka, it's an oceanography evidence, which is basically dated with carbon dating. So it is basically archaeology evidence. You see a sudden rise of 15 meters at Dwarka, and right at 5525 BCE. So there is an interval. That's how that science works, oceanography. If you go to the east coast, Tamil Nadu, east coast, you have a sudden ingression of water, again in 5525 BC, between 4000 BC and 6000 BC, all the way inside to 15 kilometers. If you go to Indonesia, there is a first record exactly matching with the flooding and destruction of Krishna's Dwarka in 5525 BCE, and something very important, because most of the Mahabharata date falls into that 3000 bracket. Actually, that evidence from Indonesia shows that there was no catastrophic sea level rise event anytime between 3500 BCE to 1500 BCE. So anyone who is claiming a date in between will not able to show any proof for flooding and destruction of Krishna's Dwarka between 3500 BC to 1500 BC. But you know what? This is not a local phenomenon. This is not a phenomenon happening around India. If you go to Turkey, the Black Sea, suddenly it was turned from a sweet water lake to a salty water sea in 5525 BC. 9 different parameters, scientific parameters showing this. This is a work of 2 geologists, Ryan and Pittman from Columbia University. If you go to West Indies, 7 different locations, sudden sea level rise of 6.5 meters in 5525 BC. And frankly, I can go on and on, 30 plus different locations spread around the world. So this was a global event, this was a global phenomenon. We'll not go into the causes of it, they are well-known causes, but yes. So very solid archaeology evidence for flooding and destruction of Krishna's Dwarka in 5525 BC.
Astronomy, genetics, genealogies, meteorology, geology, oceanography, archaeology, every field is pointing towards 5561 BC as the date of Mahabharata.
So if you look at multidisciplinary evidence, and I can just make a list again, but like 20 plus different disciplines. If the data exist, And if that data from a time perspective and a geographical or location perspective can be connected with the Mahabharata or a Mahabharata instance or a Mahabharata descriptions, it points, all the roads lead to one particular destination, 5561 BCE. So after this, 5561 BCE, I looked at all the planetary evidence. I started looking at the phases and positions of the moon through the 18 days of the war, the tithis, nakshatras for the specific events of the Mahabharata war timeline, lunar months, seasons, the duration between different instances. It all started falling in. It did not just stop with the Mahabharata text, or it did not stop with the astronomy evidence. Even beyond astronomy, Mahabharata text has 200 plus descriptions of river Saraswati going through different phases. It's in a flux. Some places it is drying up completely, Vinashan. Other places it is disappearing under the sand. Other places is coming out. Some places is flowing beautifully. And guess what? These descriptions perfectly match for 6 millennium BC. But you know what? If you even go beyond Mahabharata, I'll just give you a simple example. What is one of the key character of Mahabharata? Bhagwan Krishna. Bhagwan Krishna, he was 11 years old when he killed Kamsa. That information comes from Bhagavad Puran. Now, when he killed Kamsa, there are specific astronomy descriptions given in another text, Harivamsha. Now, if you test those, plus 11 years, therefore Krishna's birth taking place 11 years before he killed Kamsa. And Krishna passing away 36 years after the Mahabharata war, so 5561 BC and 36 years after, 5525 BC. That gives a Krishna's timeline, lifetime of 107 years. Now guess what? Madhvacharya of Advaita Vaishnava Sampradaya, he has done analysis, he's in Mahabharata Tatparya Nirnay. He says Krishna lived for 107 years. Now, I don't know how he arrived at that, but that date, also, I could arrive at exactly 107 years based on Mahabharata, Harivamsha, Bhagavad Puran, and of course, all the astronomy visual softwares. So the evidence just goes on, and it just really doesn't stop. So I mentioned climatology, I mentioned river Saraswati. The last big instance, if you think of it, is Krishna's Dwarka. Flooding and destruction of Krishna's Dwarka by gushing sea waters 36 years after the Mahabharata war. That's 5525 BCE. When you propose a theory and if you are convinced about it, you have to defend it. And the criticism that actually is coming is also very good. Actually, I encourage existing Mahabharata researchers, but even those who are not Mahabharata researchers, to actually, in a verbal way, I say, take my book and metaphorically speaking, shred it to pieces. Show me where I am wrong. And actually some people in the past, last 10 years, have come forward. And I'll tell you, every time they pointed something which I agreed with them, actually it has led to a more refinement of my theory and additional validation of my theory.
5561 BCE has now grown into a thought. Several researchers from all around the world are using the methods and success story of Nilesh Oak in their researches. Entire world history stands challenged. Even when Indian youth is still largely consuming a very Western biased history of their self, the works and ideas of Nilesh Oak have kick-started a brand new era of Indic research. Castles are falling fast. The narrative changes every passing day.
I have done what I can, what I could. Now it is up to the youth of India, every Indian, to basically look at my work, okay, do the validation for themselves. And they have to decide, are they going to wait for some foreigner to endorse my work, or are they going to look at my work, whether it's a video or a book, and read it, validate it, and decide for themselves.